You're the freest man you know, and yet you've never felt more trapped because you've spent your entire life confusing the ability to survive alone with permission to live fully. If you're the Unmapped Map-Maker we've been exploring in our series, your greatest achievement, like your absolute ironclad independence, it's slowly morphed into this solitary confinement cell that you've decorated yourself. And so you carry your self-sufficiency like a trophy, not realizing that it has now become the barrier that keeps the world at an arm's length permanently. So you grew up in the quiet echo of a father's absence, and in this void, you learned a dangerous lesson. And that is that the only person who can never let you down is the person you never have to ask anything from. So you've built a life where you're the only shareholder and you're the only employee, you're the only guard, believing that this was the ultimate expression of power. But the reality is that your freedom is more like a cage, and the bars of this cage are made of every "I've got it" phrase and "I don't need any help" kind of sentiments that you've uttered. And so you are the hero of a story who has basically conquered the mountain only to realize so that the air is very thin for anyone else to breathe with you at the mountaintop. So you've achieved independence, but you've lost human experience and connection along the way. Listen, this structural entrapment is a primary hurdle in your journey to becoming a Binteger. To be a Binteger is to be a whole individual who is intentionally moving towards experiencing wholeness by aligning their internal values with their external actions. If you will, it is the pursuit of a life that is no longer fragmented by survival strategies. Like the word integer, the word integer, it has its roots in the Latin language for a sense of wholeness, completeness, right? And so we extrapolate that to a Binteger, meaning an individual who's pursuing wholeness or someone who is untouched by the corruption of division. So in the context of the unmapped man, integrity is really the quality of being this undivided unit. You are, like, if you're internally longing for relief of being supported perhaps, but you're externally projecting a, don't disturb kind of sign of independence, you're living this life of profound disintegration. You're a person, in essence, who's split between your need for humanity around you and your fear for vulnerability. So becoming a Binteger means you're having the integrity to admit the true wholeness that you're seeking isn't found when you're just being an island. It's found in being an individual who is secure enough to exist in a state of interdependence. So this alignment is really the only key that can unlock the door of intimacy, kind of intimacy, right? You've spent so long defending your perimeter that somewhere along the way you've forgotten how to let anyone past those gates. Because you think that by being independent, you're now making yourself more attractive or more stable or more reliable. When in reality, you're just actually making yourself more invisible. Real intimacy requires this level of mutual need that your unmapped brain treats like a fatal flaw. And so you worry that if you stop being the self-made man, you will now lose the only map you've ever had to rely on heretofore. But the Binteger knows that intimacy is not a surrender of your individual power. It's actually the ultimate expression of that power. It takes far more integrity to be an individual who is open for business than it does to be an individual who is permanently closed, right? True freedom is not the ability to stay alone. True freedom is the capacity to be connected and to be able to do that without losing your core, your center. So the prison of your independence was most likely built as a response to the protection gap that your father left behind. See, in an ideal context, like for most children, the father's presence in some way provides that permission for them to lean on, right? The father shows you that you can actually rely on someone else's strength while you're, in essence, building your own. But when that didn't happen, when that map, in essence, was missing, you are now forced to be your own anchor. You're forced to be your own provider, your own protector. And so you learn that dependency was synonymous with disappointment. So you looked at the hole where your father's guidance should have been and decided that you would never, ever be that vulnerable again. You traded the possibility of connection for the certainty of control. And so now, as an adult, you're still operating from that childhood emergency state that you grew up in. And so you become this unmapped map maker who has now become so good at being the only one that you've forgotten how to be one amongst many. So integrity, like true structural wholeness, is really the courage to tell yourself that the emergency is over now and that you are allowed to put down the burden of being your only support system. I mean, maybe like take a look, if you will, at your current definition of what success looks like. I think for many of us, success looks like this high-walled fortress of maybe financial stability or physical strength or emotional like stoicism. And so we pride ourselves on the fact that if everyone else walked away tomorrow, well, we would still be standing, right? But have you noticed that the more secure you've become, the more isolated you feel? See, this is the paradox of the unmapped individual. You are like this Binteger, this whole unit that has become so whole that you're now exclusive. You've achieved like this version of integrity that is sterile and lonely. The Binteger realizes that a whole individual is not one who has no needs, but they're one who has the integrity to align their life with the reality of their human limitations. So you're not a failure because you want to experience what it's like to lean on someone, or like you are a failure of alignment when you pretend that you don't have this need to rely on others. The psychological weight here of this prison is really what leads to like a fatigue that seems like a phantom. It's the exhaustion, if you will, of having to be like the general and the soldier simultaneously. And when you refuse to like delegate your life to others, you're essentially saying that no one else has a map that's good enough to overlap with yours. And this creates like this sense of arrogance that hides a deeper sense of terror, perhaps, where you think that you're being strong, but in actuality, you're just being defensive. So the Binteger, they know that wholeness requires integration of others into your map. It requires the integrity to say, I'm an individual, but I'm not an island. And when you break the prison of independence, you lose your identity, and you finally find the context to be able to build a stronger identity. There may be some of you who are asking, like, you might, yeah. So the question I'm having come up here is, if I'm not independent, then I'm weak, right? So my self-reliance is really like the only thing that people respect about me. And if I start needing people, I'll just become like that guy who let me down way back when I was young. So if that's what's going through your mind, listen, this might be the ultimate distortion that we have to address. And that's you've associated needing with failing. But there's a massive difference between pathological dependency and an interdependence that is more principled. So your father's failure wasn't that he needed people. Your father's failure was more that he lacked the integrity to be a whole individual who stayed aligned with his commitments. So by becoming a Binteger, a person who's whole enough to actually connect with others around you, you're actually doing the opposite of what your father did. You're staying present and you're staying authentic and real. You're staying aligned with your internal mindset. So your independence isn't really your strength as much as your integrity is. There's another thought maybe that's keeping you in your cell, and that is, if you're the kind of an individual that says, I like my life as it is, the way it is, right? It's simple, it's quiet, and here no one can actually hurt me. So why would I give up this peace for the messiness of needing others? This is a question of safety contrasted with life. So you've confused the absence of the conflict with the presence of peace. So your solitary independence is safe, but it's also most likely dead. There is no growth in a vacuum, is there? So a Binteger knows that the messiness of connection is exactly where the map gets far more detailed. Integrity means having the courage to be an individual who is willing to be touched by others around you, by the world around you, even if it means that a few scratches are experienced along the way. Because you weren't built to be a museum piece behind this glass wall, were you? You were built to be a map maker in the middle of the terrain, figuring out step by step, what's our next step here, into the unknown, right? So the freedom of your prison is just really a slow death by boredom. Now, some of you might also be asking, how do I even dismantle these walls when I've spent a lifetime reinforcing these very bars? Well, you start by identifying the lie of your week, for example. Where's the one place that you're currently doing something alone simply because you're afraid of that intimacy of asking for help? Maybe it's a project at work that you're doing, or maybe it's a fitness goal. I know this is a new year and everyone's starting their fitness goals, right? Or maybe emotional burden that you've been carrying for some time. The first act of integrity is to admit to one safe person something like, listen, I'm trying to do this alone because I'm really afraid of being a burden. But in reality, I could really use a hand. When you do this, when you say this is like a radical act of internal alignment. You're making your external actions match your internal reality. So you aren't losing your freedom. You're finally using your freedom to choose a better way of living. Now, for some of you, there's a deeper fear that if you step out of this prison that you've created for yourself, you're going to experience a sense of lostness. You spent so long being like the lone navigator that you don't really know how to follow someone else's lead or assistance. But this is where I would say the late bloomer's wisdom comes in. So I wouldn't say you're behind. You're not behind in learning how to connect. You're actually just unmapped. You're an individual who is learning a new set of coordinates. And so integrity is that process of being a student of your own humanity. It's the willingness, if you will, to be incomplete in a room full of people. And when you finally let go of the need to be the self-sufficient individual, it's here that you finally gain your freedom to be a whole participant. You move from a state of rigid autonomy to a state of fluid alignment. I mean, think back, if you will, to the silence of the man who maybe didn't show up. His independence was a form of desertion. But your independence, while it may be more productive, it's also like in that same vein of desertion as well too. You're deserting the community that actually wants to love and care for you. And you're deserting maybe the partner who wants to know who you truly are. You might be deserting your own children who need to see a human being and not just a machine that just keeps going regardless. So a Binteger is that individual who stops deserting and starts now inhabiting. Integrity is that quality of being present in your own life. And listen, you can't be present in your own life if you are locked in this cage of your own making. Because the reality is you are an individual who is continuing on a daily basis to figure out what your map looks like. And it sucks doing it on your own. So I want you to imagine that relief of no longer having to be everything for yourself. Consider, if you will, the energy that you're going to reclaim when you aren't constantly having to maintain the walls of your own isolation. This is what it could look like for the individual who longs for that sense of wholeness internally. And when you align your internal needs for connection with your external social reality, the cage doors swing open, because now you aren't independent anymore. You're now integrated. And that's what we're aiming for in our experience as Bintegers. So the substance of what we're talking about here, I hope it inspires you to break the myth of that self-made man and to replace it instead with the reality of a whole individual. It's meant to show you that your self-reliance may have served for a season in your life, but it shouldn't really become your identity for like the rest of your life. Because I think we really long to experience that sense of wholeness. We want to be seen. We want to stop being the ones who are the only one, right? And start to be the one who is amongst the community. Because we are figuring out our map as we go along. And it's far more liberating when you don't have these bars to figure that map out. So as we walk out of this cage of our own making, of our independence, and as we try to step back into this world of connection, we might also realize that we have no idea how to tell the difference between what real love is and the kind that feels more like a trap. Because we've spent such a long season guarding our freedom that we don't really know how to trust a hand that isn't maybe trying to pull us down. So in tomorrow's episode, I'm going to look at why we don't trust real love. And in this episode, I want us to maybe explore a bit more of why love feels like a threat to our map and how to find the integrity to love without being lost. So join me tomorrow for that episode. In the meantime, Thanks for following along with me. This is heavy lifting, isn't it? But these are conversations necessary having. So thank you for thinking through, wrestling through these with me. I'll see you in tomorrow's episode. Bye for now.